Hello, it's Barney Black here from MS's Chronic, and our latest episode features a special guest from Shift MS, and that is Eleanor Bate. Eleanor has been with Shift MS for I think 3.5 years or so, and she's the community manager, which if you follow Shift MS or if you have the Shift MS app, which I highly recommend, then you'll be familiar with some of the content and will have perhaps even engaged with Eleanor over the last wee while. And we cover loads. And Eleanor has been a great guest talking about her role with Shift MS, the fact that this is MS Awareness Week, if you're watching it between, I think, the 20th and 26th of April. And we also talk about different MS groups and how there's a bit of collaboration across those groups with the MS community. So sit back and watch, or if you are listening to this on your favourite podcast forum, I hope you enjoy. Any feedback is greatly welcomed, and if you'd like to be a guest on any future episodes of MS's Chronic, just reach out to me. I will be delighted to hear your story. All the best.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, Eleanor. Thank you. It's good to see you. I know we've exchanged emails.
Yes. I know. It's nice to put a face to a name.
It is actually. It's always good getting that familiarity.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
Thank you. Introductions, I guess. So thank you for joining MS's Chronic. This is my little podcast. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to anything. There's been a few people involved with it that you will know. Dean, whose second name I've forgotten already.
I know who you mean.
A regular
I've emailed him a lot.
But there's been a load of other people out there, which I'm sure in your work you'll have crossed paths with them, which is pretty cool. And you're my latest guest, which is fantastic. Like I said in the email, it's really informal. I've got kind of questions, pointers to kind of maybe keep us on track in a flow, but if you're happy just to have a chat, we will just kind of just go in the direction that leads. Introductions. I mean, we know each other, I guess, through the Shift MS interactions and I think you're familiar with my background. I was diagnosed in 2017, 9 years ago, after symptoms from 2002 eventually led to a diagnosis. I won't bore anybody with that background. It's been told often enough. And I noticed, obviously, your role in Shift MS 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Did you join Shift MS, or is it longer?
It's 3.5 now.
3.5.
Yeah.
Wow. But if you wouldn't mind telling our wonderful listeners who you are, who are you, and just a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we can see how that leads into other questions, if that works for you.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Eleanor. I'm the community manager here at Shift MS. I'm based in Birmingham, but we're a charity that is global, and I've been here for about 3.5 years, which it doesn't feel like that long. It's kind of flown by. And before I worked here, I worked for a couple of other different charities. One was a women's charity and one was a children's charity. And when I first got the job at Shift MS, I didn't really know much about MS. I knew that it was a chronic neurological condition and that was about it. So it was definitely a challenge for me to wrap my head around the everyday reality of MS as someone who didn't have it. And I've found the last 3.5 years so enlightening and eye-opening to meet so many amazing people from the community. And I feel so, I feel like it's such a positive space, for all of the horrible day-to-day realities of the condition. The community just brings such a lovely positivity and a very kind of inspiring view of the world. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Excellent. How did you find your way to Shift MS? Was it something that intrigued you? Was it an opportunity from one role that you had to another? What was the journey for you?
It was completely, I don't want to say random, but it was a bit random. Like the places that I'd worked before, I'd kind of done volunteering to do with like women's stuff when I was at uni, and I had done a PGCE, which I ended up very much not becoming a teacher, which I'm very glad of. But I'd kind of worked in those spaces before, and then when this job came up, I was really intrigued by it because I just hadn't heard of a charity like Shift.ms, and I didn't have any personal connection to MS. Like, I don't have MS. I didn't know anyone with MS. So it felt like it would be a really interesting way to learn more about a community that I didn't know anything about. And I was just intrigued by the role because it was all about the volunteering experience. And now I do kind of a mixture of volunteer management and comms. So I've got like all these little tidbits that I do, but that really drew me to the role because I just felt like it was something completely new and a massive community that I'd never even engaged with before. So yeah.
It's a big community. It's interesting you say that. I didn't know anybody with MS either, although I got diagnosed with it. You've ended up working with people. And I don't know if your experience has been similar to mine. Since then, since my diagnosis, suddenly there's people that I know, but they've obviously kept it quiet or it's not been relevant in conversations or any interactions that we've had. I now know people that I knew that had MS, but I didn't know they had MS, if that makes sense. Have you had that experience? There's now people in your life that...
Yeah, I had it with there was a woman that I used to work with, and I didn't have tons of contact with her at my old job, but I'd maybe talk to her one day a week at that job. And she had mentioned that she had MS, but I didn't pry because obviously I didn't know anything about the condition, as I said. And I think before working here, I felt very uncomfortable talking about anything to do with health and anything to do with how a person manages their health and how they balance it with their work. So I think I always just was kind of sympathetic towards her and was like, that's you know, it sounds hard, but I didn't know what support I could offer as someone who didn't speak to her very much. So yeah, I mean, she was literally the only person I think I'd ever met who I knew who had MS, but it wasn't a close relationship. And since then, I've had a lot of people who I've spoken to say, oh, my mom has MS, or, you know, someone they know has MS, but it's very rare that I've bumped into people who have MS in real life when I've been speaking about my job. So I think that just highlights, you know, I think it could be a bit of, it could feel like a really nice, pleasant echo chamber to be in, because every day I'm hearing people talk about taking action over their health and finding community through the kind of hardship of living with MS. So when I'm, you know, out there in real life, I hope to meet more people outside of work events that have MS. And recently I have a Shift.ms sticker that I put on my water bottle that I take everywhere with me. So I'll be like at the gym with my water bottle out, I'll be on a train. I'm hoping that someone comes up to me and says, do you work for Shift.ms? I'm hoping one day that will happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
It will happen. I guarantee you it will. I've got some of the leaflets which I'm going to take to the local MS Society community group in Perth, because I know some people have heard of Shift MS and some have signed up and they've got the app and everything else. But yeah, now that it's out there, now that visual is there, somebody will say to you, Shift MS, I know what that is.
Yeah, I hope so. I've got the sticker on my laptop, but I felt like I'd try and just, you know, my water bottle goes everywhere with me, so I'd try and get it out there a bit more.
Got to stay hydrated.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to stay hydrated. So your role as a community manager, but you've said already, it covers more than just that. There's the probably strands to what you do. In your little introduction about who you are as well, I did have a look on Shift MS just when it talks about our team, and I have to be honest, I had to Google Robert Pattinson. I had no idea who that was. I do now. I still have got very little idea. But you're also a huge Doctor Who fan.
I am, yes.
Actually, on your little bio, a Doctor Who nerd.
I am a bit, yeah. I mean, are you?
I can't say I am. I'm old school, so I'm kind of like 1980s, 1990s Doctor Who, Tom Baker and Peter Davison. Was it Peter Capaldi?
Yes, yeah.
Kind of got back into them with the kids.
Yeah, see, I mean, I haven't really watched that many of the old Who, so I don't know if I can call myself a Doctor Who nerd. I don't know if I'm going to get absolutely eviscerated on this podcast for saying that, but I like grew up with it. My mom watched it when she was a kid, and then the Christopher Eccleston ones came out when I was
Him as well, yeah.
6 or something. So I remember watching the first Dalek episode and being absolutely petrified. And yeah, it's something that if anyone even mentions David Tennant or anything to do with that, my ears prick up. I'm quite excited to talk about it. But I completely forgot that bio was on the website about me. You've done your research.
Doctor Who nerd, yeah. I tried to find out a little bit about our guests. And Robert Pattinson, I guess this is an actor. You're fond of his work.
I am. I'm fond of his work. I am also, of that generation of people that watched a lot of Twilight, and it's never really left me. So yeah, I still love him. I think he's a lovely man.
Yeah, there's another thing that's passed me by. There's a generational bypass there.
You should watch it. You should watch it.
I will put a note to give it a go. I'll give it.
Yeah, and let me know if you're Team Edward or Team Jacob. But if you're Team Jacob, I won't come on another podcast with you.
Jacob, but Jacob's not cool. Right? Okay, that's good. Heads up. Right, so back to Shift MS.
Yes.
I know what Shift MS is. I came across Shift MS. I couldn't say when. It's years ago now anyway. It's certainly, my diagnosis, like I said, was 2017. So probably like a lot of people, and perhaps some of your experiences when you've been talking with people, you kind of, from my personal experiences, you go into this rabbit hole and you find yourself drawn to anything that's prefixed multiple sclerosis. But Shift MS is one which I was drawn to, I think, because of how it was set up and how it seems to be. It's for the people, by the people.
Yes.
As founder was as someone with MS himself, and the team and everything else has kind of grown from that, and like-minded folk and trying to create a community. That's me, obviously, kind of very broadly speaking, what I consider MS to be. It's a good network to be a part of with someone that has MS. But from your point of view, how would you define Shift MS as a charitable organisation? But how would you define it as a resource, I guess, for people? What would you signpost it as?
It's a digital community, and it's by MSs for MSs, as you said, and it's just a place for people to find other MSs that get it. It's a place for people to go when they're feeling any feeling, if they're feeling relieved at their diagnosis, if they're feeling destroyed by their diagnosis, if they're further along their MS journey and they just want a bit of support, if they're changing DMT, it's somewhere to go to find that. And it was set up by our CEO, George, because he was diagnosed when he was 22. And he felt like there was nowhere where he could meet MSs like him. And I know that it's especially difficult for people when it comes to doing the in-person groups and things like that. A lot of the time they'll go to them and they'll be kind of overwhelmed because they might see people who are a lot further along their MS journey, who maybe are more progressed and at a kind of further level of disability. And that can be terrifying. So I think he wanted a digital space where people could kind of take things at their own readiness and, really find other community members that they could relate to, similar age, similar location, similar life views, basically. And it's kind of blossomed from what George created all those years ago into what we now have as the app. So that obviously has the forum on there, and that's a place where every week there's hundreds of posts from people asking questions, sharing little wins, which is always great. And we have all these videos on there as well, and it's basically just a place for people to go when they need emotional connection, because a lot of the time the healthcare services in this country and in other countries don't have the scope to always necessarily offer that emotional connection. So that's what we do. We're trying to get people to feel emotionally connected to other MSs and feel empowered to make proactive decisions about their MS.
That makes sense. And the empowerment and the emotional part, from a personal point of view, is definitely something which I can see, and I can relate to what you're describing about people where they are in the journey of their own multiple sclerosis diagnosis, because it's a varied thing. And I've always said I regard myself at the low end or the soft end or the very lesser impact physically. I've got some residual things going on, but they don't they don't debilitate me in any shape or form. I'm able to live a fairly normal life. Keep taking the pills and all that kind of stuff. You know, the drugs do work. But I was interested to when you were saying there about the role that you've got and the experience that you've had since. Has it been what you expected, or how has your journey been a part of Shift MS? You mentioned about how you'd learned loads since obviously coming in engagement with people with MS, because it wasn't a normal part of life before that. How has your journey evolved in the role that you've got with Shift MS as a person, but also professionally?
That's a great question. I think I've definitely learned how to just have a kind of better mindset towards everything, whether that's in my professional life or personal. I feel like, as I said at the start, the kind of optimism that a lot of MSs have is really inspiring. And you know, a lot of people will also come to Shift and all they can think of is the bad, and that's completely fine. You know, it's not a space, we don't want it to be an echo chamber of just like everything's happy and daisies and rainbows, because it's not that. It's not like, life isn't like that for anyone, let alone if you have a chronic condition. So I think it's really taught me how to kind of take the good with the bad and weather the storm. And I feel like as well, professionally for me, I've kind of reached a point where I feel quite confident in talking about health stuff. And me and my friends always joke that I'm a woman in STEM now, because when I was at school, I wasn't good at science or maths or anything like that. And so now to be in like a kind of healthcare space, it's a bit like, how did I end up here? Like, I do sometimes reflect and think, how did I end up here? But actually it's exactly where I want to be. I feel like there's such an importance in navigating your emotional health at the same time as your physical health, and having that kind of what's the word when you have your body and your mind together, holistic, there we go. Like having a holistic approach to your health in general is something that I feel like I've definitely taken on board. Like, as someone who doesn't live with MS, I feel like I've learned a lot about health in general since working here. And you know, emotional health comes from your physical health and vice versa. And so yeah, it's overall just been a really enlightening experience to work here and meet so many people who have so much amazing life advice.
I think what you just said there about emotional and physical health being, they overlap each other constantly. It's a perpetual circle. You know, to be feeling good mentally, you have to do things physically.
Yeah.
Give you that payoff. And it's like it's horse and cart or chicken and egg, whatever comes first. You know,
exactly,
it's hard to say because they're equal. To have that, and when you've got a chronic condition or any health condition at all, the lifestyle, which is a fairly broad strokes in terms of what that covers, is really important. It can be difficult. I've found people think about the lifestyle changes that they want to make more easily than making the lifestyle changes that they need to make. Do you know what I mean? And I think I've definitely got aware of and taken advice and listened to different people's perspective on the impacts to any changes that they've made or not made. Even things like the disease modifying drugs. You know, when people first get diagnosed, particularly, but even after diagnosis, the inner debate that they have with what they're going to do in terms of treatment, taking anything, whether it's pills or infusions or getting involved in trials and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. It's just trying to navigate all of those things. And then the emotional part, I think, particularly with people with multiple sclerosis, can sometimes be a heavier burden than the physical challenges. Not that one is any better than the other, and some can be more debilitating than the other. But I think that emotional, physical thing is really important, that people in their own time can get to grips with it.
Definitely. And do you think, I'm going to interview you now, do you think that for you, you've being diagnosed with MS has meant that you've changed more lifestyle wise than you would have if you hadn't been diagnosed, if you know what I mean?
I don't think it's changed. I was always very active and have always been a very active, sporty guy. Football, badminton, volleyball were always in the background from school, pretty much. And I started running in the early 2000s because I moved away from that kind of community where I was on public transport. I couldn't guarantee I was going to be anywhere at any particular time because I didn't know what train I was going to get home from work or all that kind of stuff. So I started to run. And then circumstances changed and I got back into football. So physically and everything else like that, I've always been fairly active. Having said that, small contradiction, I think I'm staying active because I've got MS.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that in some way is a bit of a push me, pull me thing. I've actually, just before our call, my friend and I, we run pretty regularly. I've got a couple of events this year, and we're talking about just how little we're looking forward to going out on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock for a long run. But partly I want to do that because we go for a coffee and a chat and it's a good social catch up and it's a thing that we've got into routine. But the reason I keep doing these things and keep signing up, there is a desire to continue to test myself. But I think there's also a desire not to allow MS to define what I can and can't do.
Yeah.
And that I think that answers the question, but it's difficult to know because, again, this is where the emotional side of MS for me can sometimes just get in the way, because I had my first. I know now I had my first symptoms in 2002. I didn't know multiple sclerosis was a consideration until 2015, and then a couple of years after that, subsequent things happened. I began to get involved with a neurologist and it began to be, the dots were getting joined up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if in 2002, if the conversation I had 13 years later had been back then, if that would have changed anything. Because again, physically, apart from and I know now the relapses, apart from losing feeling in my feet or losing feeling in my back area, or getting real chronic chest pains, which turned out to be the MS hug, which I continue to say it needs to be renamed. It's like the MS crush, you know, not a hug of any nature.
It's a bit of an evil thing to call it that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a what's that opposite thing? But yeah, so I don't know if having MS. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that. I do know having MS shapes how I think, but I try to not allow it to dominate how I think.
Yeah, and that's good. And I think I've spoken to so many people who always ask those questions. I think pretty much every MSer does, like, what would happen if I'd been diagnosed earlier? How would my life be different if I'd had another neurologist? Like, there's all these what if questions that come up, and it can be hard. And I've seen some people who it kind of eats them up and they really labor on those questions. And it can be hard to watch that. And I know that I think that having the mindset that you've got, that you don't want your MS to kind of take away from your life, and that you're staying active because of the fact that you have MS, but also because you care about your health and your mental health and all that kind of thing. I think that's paramount. And yeah, I just think it can be so easy to think about, oh, what if I'd done this earlier? Or what if I'd done X, Y, Z? It's impossible to carry on like that.
Yeah, honestly, I could talk about this for hours. It would be wrong. This is me. It would be wrong of me. It would be naive of me. It would be ridiculous of me not to acknowledge having multiple sclerosis, having a condition which is so unpredictable, doesn't sit in the back of the brain, and occasionally pops up, you know. And it's not even occasionally. It's because if you're on a disease modifying drug, my drug of choice is dimethylfumarate. It's a morning and a PM. So every morning I get reminded I've got MS because I'm taking this tablet. And you move on from that pretty quickly. And I can understand why some people feel that it can be quite consuming. And I do think that personality-wise, pre-condition influences post-condition rationale and thoughts. And then I think, because I know you can change your thought process, organizations support organizations like Shift MS can really, really help, because I think you said it earlier, you're in a space where people know what you're talking about without you having to really explain it.
Yeah.
Not kind of, if I talk about the MS hug, they get it, they know it. You talk about the journey pre-diagnosis up to diagnosis, they understand the tests, the lumbar punctures, the uncertainty that comes with that. And then I think that helps people's mindset maybe become a little bit more focused. Not all at the same time, but they kind of, they're no longer alone in some cases where they might feel that they are, or they might have support, but that support is, have you tried your diet? Have you drinking coffee? Have you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's everybody becomes an expert with the best of intentions most of the time.
Yeah.
Shift MS, I think, helps you expand your thought process about, and it depends on how impacted you are physically and emotionally, I guess. But I think if you go to some place like Shift MS, to me, it suggests that you are at least looking for some advice, some guidance, some support, which means you are open to understanding a little bit more of and how you can maybe get the best out of your life. So I can go on about that for ages. Sorry, I can go off on a tangent there about me and everything else.
No. It's like what you're saying is completely true, and I've had people say to me that MS is like a constant unwanted companion, and it's something that you wish you could shake off, but you can't. And I think finding community through Shift.ms is a way that people feel they can really open up, because I'm the type of person that is an open book. You can look at my face and you can tell what I'm thinking. I'm not very good at hiding my feelings. So I think if I had MS, I would probably be telling everyone I meet about all of my issues. And I think that there are a lot of people that aren't like that. And a lot of people come to Shift.ms and learn, God, like I've been bottling this up for ages. And, I'm not saying that telling everyone everything is the way to go. I'm not saying that, there's a perfect way to communicate your worries and your issues. And this goes for everything, not just MS. But there has to be a certain level of communication, a certain level of catharsis as well, like getting your thoughts out and finding other people that get it. Because if you talk to your partner and they don't have MS, then it can be quite an isolating experience. And I think that's what our buddy network does well as well, which is a one-to-one peer support system where people are matched up with someone who's a bit further along in their journey. And it just gives that person a space to ask questions, have a shoulder to cry on, have someone to laugh with. And a lot of people come away from that with a friend, or they'll feel like they've, maybe spoke to someone for 6 months and they feel like they have come on leaps and bounds in terms of their progress mentally, which is the most important thing. And it's really affirming for the whole team at Shift when you see the way that people have come out of the buddy network with a new confidence. And I just think, there's not that many services, the NHS can't really offer that. And so that's where we come in, and I hope that it's doing what it needs to do.
I guess you'll know more than I, because you'll know about whatever the engagement's like. But the buddy network, I've recently become a part of that, and I can see that interaction. And there's always people that are contributing in different ways with different things and different updates. And again, I think it emphasizes the need for support groups and support networks like Shift MS. The NHS they don't have the resource or the resource either in people or in funds to do the kind of things that Shift MS is able to do. Certainly not as regularly and not as consistently. And perhaps not as patient-led. I think that's another thing as well, which Shift MS is really important for people perhaps to get involved with, is that it really is about for the people, by the people. It's not a bunch of, not that there are no academics within the Shift MS community, but it's not academics doing it from a fairly kind of theoretical perspective about this is what we think you should have. No, it's people shaping it
Yeah.
that MS or have been affected by MS, and that hopefully gives people confidence, I would
Yeah.
think, in joining a group or at least exploring groups like Shift MS.
Definitely. I mean, the fact that George is still our CEO and lives with relapsing remitting MS is a testament to, you know, the passion that he has for people getting support from other MSs. And we have almost 300 volunteers, most of whom have MS. And so, yeah, a lot of our staff team might not have MS, but everything that we do is informed by MSs. And we have a co-production group where we go to them when we want to produce new content or we want to do an update on the app, and we say to them, how does this work for you? How can we make this more accessible?
Yeah.
How can we do this in a way that actually is right for you, and it's not just us trying to guess what people need? Because I think people are kind of sick of that in healthcare spaces, as you say, like hearing academics who are kind of maybe emotionally far removed from the project because they're doing it purely professionally. That can be quite isolating. So having people there who know are creating the outputs is really important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think you've made me think of I did write down a couple of questions, and one of them was about social platforms and the whole internet, and how that supports and how you see that evolve. And obviously, Shift MS has just recently, in terms of how long Shift MS has been going, launched this app. And that's another way to engage and connect with people. The Buddy Network's got its own WhatsApp group as well. So there's different ways for people to connect. How have you seen that evolve, and where have you seen it be its most effective in terms of the digital space?
It's been amazing to see the last few years. I've seen some really fantastic friendships blossom just from being on calls with volunteers. We have a volunteer called Steve Thomas who lives in London, and we have a volunteer called Mark Lynch, I believe his name is, and he lives in America. And they have become fast friends just from being on buddy calls together, that myself and my colleague Kelly kind of present. And they have spoken on there, and despite being, you know, apart, you know, a whole sea being in between them, and like living with different healthcare systems and in different cultures, they've managed to make a really nice friendship, and they share insightful things with each other. Mark shares his poetry that he writes about MS with Steve, and it's like seeing that is so lovely, and it feels really just heartwarming to see that. And I think that there has definitely been an evolution when it comes to what I've seen in the last few years, because I joined Shift MS before it was an app. And so it was just on the website, and then I think we've noticed recently a lot of people coming to Shift MS and saying, well, I was on a Facebook group for MS and I was finding that people were putting loads of misinformation in and kind of conspiracy theories and being quite horrible to each other. And I think there are a lot of spaces on the internet, I don't want to, you know, single out Facebook. There's other places where it happens, but there are places where there's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of people taking out their anger, which isn't necessarily supposed to be directed at these other people, but it's just anger and frustration at their condition that's coming out, and it's being directed to other people. And places like that, they can't, because they're so huge, you don't get that personal feeling. The moderation isn't the same. I am on a team of 3 staff who moderate our app all the time, and we're constantly trying to make sure that people are having a positive experience on the app. And I think people feel more listened to and heard, because if something goes wrong on Facebook, they might report it and they'll get an automated message, or they might not hear about it at all. If it happens on our app, they'll hear from us, and you know, posts will get deleted or people will be warned and things like that. And I think people are very wary of the internet these days, as they should be. I'm a bit scared of it myself, but like it's it's nice to have a place that is just for people with MS, and that is kind of exclusive in that way. And, you know, people who maybe healthcare professionals who work within MS, or, you know, relatives or loved ones of people with MS as well.
Yeah.
And so having that exclusivity is really nice, because it means that there's an extra level of understanding that you might not get on those bigger platforms.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the understanding and the scale definitely. But I guess you may become a victim of your own success with that scale, and it's trying to maintain
You never know, yeah.
that community feeling which Shift MS obviously has. And the dialogue, you're right, people can lash out, and they're not thinking about how it's being received. They're thinking about just expressing themselves. And sometimes that can be destructive, not constructive, you know. And it's and then once I press send, it's oh God, I need to bring that back. Sometimes they may do some self-editing, but yeah, take 30 seconds before you kind of respond to something that might irritate your thought process in any shape or form, because there's an audience out there who are really just looking for support of some kind, or even interaction as well. They're maybe not even looking for an opinion, just an acknowledgement, I think.
Yeah, just something that's validating. We have so many people who say to us that, you know, when they post a question on the forum, they don't necessarily want someone to come in and say, well, you shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing this. They just want someone to listen. They just want someone to say, I hear you, I've been there. And I think that that's what is unique about Shift, is that we do have over 80,000 members now, and we have so many people who are just there to listen, and you know, they receive support and then they want to give support, which is really nice.
Yeah, no, that's good. That kind of takes me to, I was thinking about, I saw that you were recently at the MS Trust conference.
Yes.
Which I'd love you to share a little bit about that. But I have a kind of question to wrap around that, and so much as I talked to Eleanor about when I was first leading to diagnosis. I knew when I got my diagnosis, that's what I was getting told. No, it wasn't. I don't know if it was because it was blindingly obvious and it was kind of just finalizing the symptoms and the tests. But I've heard people say that it was a shock when they got the diagnosis, or whatever their own personal journey to that point was. But after that, you kind of go looking for answers. You go looking for MS Society, MS Trust. You go into YouTube and Dr. Google and find things like Shift MS.
Yeah.
How effective? And I had a wee look at the MS Trust conference and the different organisations that were involved with that. But how effective now, maybe compared to when you first joined, is the collaboration between all those different communities, which are all, I guess they all say they want the same thing. They want an end to MS, or they want to be able to find the reasons that MS exists so they can deal with it more strategically, etc. What is the collaboration like across the different forums with all the different organizations that are out there? Because if they're all aiming for the same goal, you're hoping that there's a conversation taking place that they can use all the insight that they've got and the experience and resources, etc. So how do you find that in your role with Shift MS?
Well, it's funny you asked that now, because it's MS Awareness Week next week.
Next week it is.
And every year for the past, it's definitely been going on since before I was here, so it might be about 5 years. We've been involved in a campaign with loads of other MS charities, so MS Society, MS Trust, MS UK, Overcoming MS, Talks with MS, Neurotherapy Network. It's probably MS Together. I'm thinking of these off the top of my head now. There's too many of us to count. But basically every year we spend months planning our campaign that we collaborate on and we work with together. And it's obviously all about kind of the same goal. And this year we've come together with the mission of addressing misconceptions about MS. And that was something that we all worked together, and we had members from all of our separate communities come together to be in focus groups and to ask them what they want to see from the campaigns. And we do that every year, and I think it's a really great opportunity to be collaborative. And it's interesting, I was talking to my colleague Vicky about this when we were at the MS Trust conference, because we were sat in this room and we were all kind of sat around the edges of the room on our tables with our stalls, and I was looking around and I was thinking every single person here just wants to support each other and support the community, but each has their own unique goals. So for example, MS Together, they're for, I believe it's 18 to 35-year-olds, so they're supporting people who are much younger. Obviously you've got MS Society, who do a lot of research. You've got all these different amazing charities that all have a slightly different goal, but all really enjoy working together. And the MS Trust Conference is aimed at healthcare professionals. So it was basically a lot of me sitting there and talking to neurologists and MS nurses and physios. And some of them would come over and say, oh, we always recommend you. And some of them wouldn't have heard of us before. And they'd go around every single stall and they'd get to know us all. And they'd say to us, oh, it's just so lovely because you're so different from the others, but you know, you've got that digital side that maybe some of the others don't have, but then they've got this that you don't have. So we all kind of complement each other, I'd like to think, which is very nice. You know, we're definitely not competing.
Yeah, but there's obviously there is even indirect collaboration. It's like you find out about each other's groups, and you're doing that. Oh, that's an amazing idea, and then they maybe take that in terms of the kind of the seed of the idea, and back to their organization and try and find a way. Because I think you mentioned something there as well about the group that's for a particular age group. Clearly, that's probably why it's such a difficult thing to navigate on an individual basis. Is that what group do I belong in?
Yeah.
You know, both ethnicity, where are you at in the MS journey? Are you relapsing? Are you progressive? It's certainly, you know, it's like where is the space for me? Where can I find my tribe? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And it was really nice to talk to people from Asian MS, which is an offshoot of MS Society, because in a lot of MS research, I think it's quite underrepresented for the Asian experience of MS. So it's just really great to hear that an organization like that is, you know, being represented at these events. And we were on a stall next to the MS pregnancy register, and so they obviously do a lot of work around learning more about what happens to pregnant people when it comes to MS. And yeah, it's just always great to be in those spaces and know that, like, regardless of what point you're at with your diagnosis, with your MS journey, no matter what background you're from, that you're going to be welcomed in all of them, which is really nice.
Without a doubt. You mentioned MS Awareness Week. Let's talk a little bit about that. You talked about addressing misconceptions. I don't know if you can give any headlines, or it's just too early to let anything out the bag. But what are you hoping broadly, if it has to stay fairly generic, about MS Awareness Week next week? What can people? How can people take advantage of MS Awareness Week?
So the aim for next week is really just for, you know, remaining the people that are in our community, in the MS community, to feel validated. You know, there's a lot of things that we're going to bring up, and I don't know how much I can say yet because I think some of it still is under embargo, but you know, there's things about like how people are mistreated because people don't think they have MS because of the way they look, or the one day they might be, you know, able to run a half marathon, and the next week after they can barely stand up, you know, things like that. The kind of misconceptions that people have where they just go like, oh, you were fine the other day, your MS can't be that bad, all that kind of stuff.
You don't look ill.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. The amount of times that people have said to me that they've heard that, and I'm like, how have people not learned yet? That's something you shouldn't say. But yeah, that's our overall aim, is to really kind of run home that you should think again when it comes to challenging someone's disability. And what we want to do is really just to get people to engage with it, share their stories, use the hashtag MSThinkAgain, basically just talk about it and get the community as loud as possible, because this campaign isn't just for the MS community, it's also for the wider community in this country. You know, we're doing some press work as well, which MS Society is very much ran. You know, they've got a whole press team. They're quite a big beast at MS Society, so they're able to do that, which is amazing. So hopefully we can get some wider awareness in general from people who don't have MS as well.
Brilliant. Just something you mentioned there made me think about MS Week's coming up, 20th to 26th. After MS Week, how do you keep the key themes alive?
Ooh, good question. Well, there is World MS Day, which I think is that in May. I should know that. That's bad. But we are currently thinking about the campaign for that, and I think we just really try to make sure that we're always elevating MS's stories.
Yeah.
Everything that we post on socials, everything that is posted on the app, everything that is posted on YouTube, it's all about MS's stories, uplifting them, getting their voices out there, because, you know, they're the only people who can speak for their stories and really share their kind of everything from the heart. So yeah, we just try to uplift people and get people to also, once they've received support, which I mentioned earlier, if they've received support from us, how can they give support to other people? So they're keeping that ecosystem alive within Shift.
Yeah.
And the more people that are getting support, the more that message will be out there.
It's about sharing the word, isn't it? It's just signposting it, letting people know what content they can get, how they can get value from it, and then add their own value as well. I think that's what I take from that.
Yeah.
Because these things come around, and I try and remember them in the diary and everything else. And I guess I'm kind of like, from your point of view, I am your audience. You are preaching to the converted a little bit in terms of me. I guess when I go to the local MS groups or the local MS group in Perth, only a few of them know about Shift MS, or there's only a few of them that have explored Shift MS, which is probably more accurate. And I think trying to be a bit of an advocate for the platform that it has, I think it's really important, because again, it just opens up a, I don't know if I like the phrase a safe space. It opens up a familiar space for people. You know, like I said earlier, they don't have to explain the language or the terminology, you know, where they are on the journey, because people will get it. You know, they'll absolutely get it. And I think in part an awareness week and the MS Day, because I think MS Day in America is different to the one in...
Yeah, it's not, and we're a global community, so keeping up with all the different World MS Days, oh God.
Yeah, and that's why I was wondering about the collaboration piece as well, is how do we make sure that, because duplication can be a good thing, but we also don't want to operate in isolation either. It's kind of getting that happy balance between everybody's objectives. You know, because you've obviously got a body of work to get ready to launch for World MS Week, and there's going to be, I guess, a strategy behind that in terms of who do we want to reach, what do we want to tell them, what do we want them to take from it, so that it can continue its own momentum. That sounds like what I'm looking forward to. So, addressing the misconceptions of MS, that seems to be the banner overarching things for next week, is it?
Yeah, it is. We're trying to encourage people to think again about what they might think about MS. And, you know, also, I find it really interesting as someone who doesn't have MS to hear that, because, you know, 4 years ago, before I'd ever worked for Shift, I didn't know anything about MS apart from that one person that I mentioned that I worked with. And I just didn't know anything. And if I'd seen that campaign then, that could have been something where I would have, you know, changed my mindset about certain things. I would have learned something new. I would have been able to be more kind of understanding and inclusive in my everyday life. If I met someone with MS, I'd have a bit more of an understanding. If someone I knew closely was diagnosed, I'd have more understanding. And so I think it's, you know, because MS is kind of, you know, as you say, you were diagnosed and you didn't know anyone. It's one of those things where a lot of the time it's kind of mysterious, and it's, you know, it's shrouded in mystery, which is, I think that's kind of crazy these days, because there's so many of us all talking about it. But I think maybe we just haven't gone out to the general public enough. Maybe we're just sticking within, you know, the people that follow us are people with MS or people who work within the MS space. And so maybe we need to be out there more, just you know, talking to everyday people. And we did do a project a few years ago where we were kind of going up to people and interviewing them on the street and being like, what do you think MS is? And that did bring to light a lot of very interesting misconceptions that, you know, a lot of the time people don't do them because they're being mean. It's just a kind of naivety towards the condition, and it affects so many people that I think that just needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, it's knowledge, isn't it? It's when it comes into your life, you suddenly gather knowledge, you get knowledge, and if you didn't know anything about it, you very quickly get some ground level. And I kept at the beginning, you just reminded me, I kept having to remind myself I didn't have ME, I had MS, and it's just because it was 2 letters. And there was a familiarity. I knew nothing. I knew very little about both, although I did have a friend who had ME, so that was maybe why that subconsciously was the one that kept coming to my conversation. It's not MS, and little things like that. And then you begin to get an understanding about what it is, and the risk is you get an understanding of what it is and what it could become. And it's that emotional journey that you can end up on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that as well, because when we did our focus groups for MS Awareness Week, someone said that is a misconception, you know, it's not ME, it's MS. So I think it's quite a common thing that people think, you know, one letter.
Yeah, just be the association with the letters.
Yeah.
Because I think ME possibly was in the media at some point for various reasons more than MS. And that could take me down another conversation about how MS is portrayed in the media and telly and everything else, but we won't go there because that's a long chat. Focus. So biggest focus for I guess for you in your role and the community manager that you are with Shift MS. Obviously you've got the MS Week coming up. What do you see the rest of this year shaping up like for you in terms of your priorities, and for us people that are a member or join Shift MS? What can we look forward to?
Great question. Well, at the moment, since we launched the app, there have been a few teething problems, as there always are when you launch a new app. We're a small team. We've only got 10 core staff and a few contractors. So it's very much a trial and error thing sometimes. And our developers are amazing. But one thing that we've really been working on since the app was launched, and that we'll continue to work on, is just making sure it is the right place for people to go. It's accessible. People can find the resources they need on there. People can navigate it in an easy and understandable way. I think it's like, you know, it makes me kind of, I suppose, check my privilege at times when I'm like, you know, I don't have to worry about navigability when it comes to apps, because I don't have any specific needs, accessibility needs. So, you know, we have our UX designer who is always doing interviews with people where they run through how did they navigate between this bit, you know, if they suffer with vision problems or, you know, cognitive problems, how can we improve that for them? And then that's really where I want to get more of our co-production group involved and more of our volunteers involved, and getting more videos out there that people can see and relate to. We recently, it was a good few months ago now. It's hard to remember when things happened within the Shift space. It all kind of blurs into one. But we launched this kind of, we called it, it's like a user-generated video prompt that we have on our stories page. And there's a question that goes up every 2 weeks, and then people can record their 30-second answer, and that goes out to the whole community. And I really want to get more people responding to that, and more new faces on the app, because I think people really appreciate seeing people like them just being frank and honest and open in a really like easy way. You know, it takes 30 seconds to do. So yeah, I definitely want to encourage more people to be sharing their story and posting on the app, putting videos on the app, whatever they might want to do, because that's how people feel connected, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It is. It's again, it comes back to that whole. It's for people. It's for the people, by the people. Because it's then they feel part of what's going on, and instead of being they're a part of it instead of it being done to them. I think that's really important in anything that's trying to say that they represent that community. community has to be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, they're just being told what they should have, because we know better. And definitely from my experience with Shift MS, it's much more open. It's a very broad church in terms of its inclusivity, and its accessibility. And I don't mean that in the terms of how people can use things, but just its ability to be involved, which is really important, I think, for people to know that it is a place like that. I'm conscious of time, and I've got a couple of questions before we wrap up. One is more a general thing. You've now got the experience that you've got working with Shift MS. You've been involved across many different projects and forums and different groups and things. What advice would you give to someone in your capacity as someone that works with Shift MS? What advice would you give to folks affected by MS if they were looking for anything?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Sorry, let me maybe pitch that in a slightly better way, because it was a little bit broad. If people, when they find out you work for Shift MS,
what
would you advise them about what your role and what Shift MS is and how it could be a help to them?
I would just say that Shift.ms is a community for bioMSs for MSs, a place to go to find people who get it. Sorry that I said that in a weird order, but yeah, I'd say that. And I would say, what was the second part to your question? Sorry.
It was about how you would say what Shift MS has to offer for them, I think.
Yes, I would say it is a place to go to find people that get it, to find a listening ear, emotional support, and advice.
Yeah,
because that's what it is, and we don't want to overcomplicate things by being like, look at all this research we have on here, and look at all of this stuff that we don't currently have the capacity to do and that other charities are already doing. The emotional support is the unique thing that we offer, and the buddy network is absolutely priceless for people who are at a vulnerable part of their journey. So I would say that. Yeah.
Right. I think what I would say from a user of the Shift MS, and I do use other platforms. That I'm not out here to promote Shift MS exclusively, but it is a platform I'm very familiar with. Is I found it doesn't matter when you dip in and out. There's a continuity, and even if you miss anything that gets launched, any of the new projects, any of the new video content, it's still there. It's easy enough to kind of find out the things that you missed, and you can almost just set your own notifications and things as well. But that I find is quite useful. And without, I don't want to criticize other forums, other platforms, other organizations. Some can be, I guess it goes back to the point about knowing what tribe do I belong to. But sometimes platforms can be very clinical. Then they can be very specific in their information, which again, it's accurate, but the human part of it can sometimes, for me, seem to be missing a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think that perhaps the scale of Shift MS, and I hope that continues as it grows, because inevitably Shift MS will grow because awareness of MS grows, and by default that means that the audience is going to get larger. I hope that that community feel and that of the people that are contributing are the ones which understand it is still and stays a key part of what I think was the original goal to begin with when it was first set up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a place to be vulnerable is so important, no matter whether you have MS or not. And I think obviously if you have a chronic health condition, then that's even more important. Somewhere where you can just kind of bare your soul a little bit, and you don't have to go on there and tell everyone your deepest, darkest worries. You can just say, what's everyone's experience of Ocarus or whatever. Like you can ask whatever you want, but it can be whatever you make it, I think.
Yeah. No, I think so. And it goes back to mindset and emotional as well as physical. Any organization can have a positive impact on you emotionally, because it can take you from being alone to being a part of something. And that, I think, again, from an MS point of view, I talk a lot about not being physically affected, but I'm pretty convinced emotionally is the area where I have probably changed a little, and then a positive emotional space is where I like to try and find myself, and I think Shift MS helps create that outlet for me when I need a little bit of maybe a pep talk or some sort of direction shift from where I might find myself.
Yeah,
The running helps. The running can help, but sometimes you kind of got to go back to your people, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Eleanor, thank you very much. I'm conscious I've taken up a good hour of your time, so I want to thank you for that. If there's anything else you want to say in terms of Shift MS and support or promoting that, please do. But I do have one last question, which I ask all my guests, and I don't know if you've had a chance, but I like to get a musical choice, a song choice, which I can add to the Music is Chronic playlist, which is vast and eclectic. And generationally, I might have to Google who you nominate. Well, maybe not. I've got quite a broad musical range. So let's see. What have you got?
Well, I did pick the song before because I felt like I couldn't go into this without choosing it. It's a song from the 80s, so
that's me.
I've chose it for a couple of reasons. The first is I've just been listening to it loads recently. I think it came on my Discover Weekly. I've just been listening to it loads since then. And the second reason is because it's a song really about emotional vulnerability and about opening up. And the song's called Shoot from the Heart by Judy, I don't know how you say her second name, Tzuke? Tzuke. But it's basically just a really nice song that talks about like opening up. And I think it's definitely in the context of with a partner, but I think it's kind of one of those songs that you can relate to just your relationships with anyone. Just like shoot from the heart, let it go, open up, that kind of thing. And yeah, I hope that relates to a lot of people. It definitely relates to what we talked about today. I didn't realize we'd talk so much about the kind of mental health side of it, but yeah, I think it mirrors everything we've spoken about on this, really.
Sounds perfect. I have to be honest, I don't think I've heard it, but it could be one of those songs that once I hear it, I'll go, that one. So I will let you know, and I'll put it to the playlist and let everybody else hear it. It sounds like a great tune. So again, thank you very much. I could go off on different tangents, but like I said, it's a really, hopefully for you, it's been a fairly informal chat and being able to talk about some things which others will find some relevance in when they get a chance to listen to it. So thank you very much for joining MS is Chronic.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. My first podcast that I was ever on was a bit of a shambles because it was at a conference and people kept walking behind me. So I think this is a better one. Second time lucky, but it's been really fun.